Hi, my name is Janice Gray, and I am going to be discussing chapter 14 of Skinner's book about behaviorism, and it's entitled Summing Up. Chapter 14 revisits the 20 statements that Skinner put at the beginning of the book that he felt were misconceptions about behaviorism. So what I'm going to do is revisit those statements and then discuss why Skinner thinks that they are incorrect. All right, statements 1 through 5. Statement 1, it kind of talks about ignoring consciousness and feelings and state of mind, and behaviorism does not. Skinner says it just finds new ways to study it. The second statement is said that behaviorism neglects innate endowment and argues that the behavior is acquired during a lifetime of the individual. Skinner feels that that is not true. Think about the discussions of phylogeny and ontogeny. Skinner disagrees with that statement. Statement 3, it says that behaviorism formulates behavior as a set of responses to stimuli, representing a person kind of like it's a robot or a machine. And Skinner feels that that is not true. The stimuli do not make the response happen. The stimuli affects the occurrence of those responses. Statement 4, that it is said that behaviorism does not attempt to account for the cognitive processes, and there are a lot of cognitive processes that take place in the mind. And Skinner says behaviorism does not. It doesn't reject the process, but it investigates the contingencies that make the processes happen. Number 5, it is said that behaviorism has no place for intention or purpose. Like the I feel, they discount the feeling producing. The I, like I feel like, or I, it's because I feel a certain way. Behaviorism rejects the idea of causal efficacy of the feelings and the purpose, like I did it because I felt a certain way. Statement 6 through 10. It is said that behaviorism cannot explain creative achievement like with the arts and music and science, but Skinner feels like the contingencies of reinforcement may explain the art or the achievement instead of a person like having a trait for being creativity or be creative or having a creative mind, that the contingencies can explain that. 7, it assigns no role to self or sense of self, but Skinner feels like behaviorism understands and supports the uniqueness that we have in all of us. Statement number 8, it is said that it is necessarily superficial and cannot deal with the depths of the mind or personality. Skinner believes that they necessarily don't study the mind, but they do acknowledge that it is important. Statement number 9, it says it limits to the prediction and the control of behavior and misses the essential nature of being a man. And Skinner believes that understanding behavior is important and the key to understanding mankind. Number 10, it talks about what the animals that it uses with the experiments. It uses rats, and therefore confined to those features of human beings shared with animals, music, literature, science, or mathematics. Skinner believes that the experiments go from simple to complex, and animals can be used in the experiments because it's a controlled setting. And rats are often used in many experiments. Statement 11 through 15. Statement 11, it talks about the achievements in a laboratory control can't be duplicated in the regular life and everyday life. But Skinner feels that it's a controlled situation because it is an experiment, and the results that happen in the lab can be used to interpret the behavior in other places because you look at the variables that occur. 12 believes that behaviorism is oversimplified and the facts are either trivial. Skinner says that, behaviorism is not something that's simple, it's complex, or has many layers. Statement 13, it says that behaviorism is scientific rather than scientific, and that it just emulates the sciences. Skinner believes it is a science, and it has order to it, and the order has the contingencies with it. Statement 14 says its technological achievements could have come about through the use of common sense. Skinner believes it's not necessarily common sense, because sometimes you do things in common sense and the results are not always good results, even though you have used common sense. But common sense is not always the only factor. And statement 15, it says that if its contentions are valid, they must apply to the behavior scientist himself. And what he says is therefore only what he has been conditioned to say. Skinner in this statement talks about a behaviorist. When the behaviorist is observing, they're behaving also. Statement 16 says that behaviorism dehumanizes man, that it reduces man and destroys man. But Skinner feels that it doesn't reduce the individual. They're looking for a way to explain it in a different way. It's not reducing man. 17, it is concerned only with general principles and therefore neglects the uniqueness of the individual. Again, Skinner says that behaviorism values the uniqueness, and it also values the different experiences. Statement 18, he says it is necessarily antidemocratic because the relationship between the experiment and the subject is manipulated, and the results are kind of like a dictatorship. But Skinner says, manipulation is going to happen when you do an experiment, any situation. But if it happens, then what you have to do is work to understand the situation of why it happens. Statement 19, it says that behaviorism regards abstract ideas such as morality and justice as fiction. Skinner says that things that we call moral are products of our contingencies that are arranged by a government system, and we need to just analyze those contingencies. And the last statement, statement 20, that he talks about in this chapter, says that it is indifferent to the warmth and the richness of human life. And Skinner, for this one, he says that, people usually don't care about things until they really understand it. So once we understand something, the how of something, that's when we fully enjoy it. The next section of the book is entitled Behavior's Own Behavior. And if you look at that, it just means like at times it looks like the behavior is just going against what he's saying. Because when you are observing something, you are behaving. On the positive side is the next section of the book. And this section, Skinner talks about the positive things for behaviorism, that it explains relationships between behavior and the environment. It looks at the individual, not a group. Also, it shows the influence of the environment and not the feelings. It has physiological research, which is important, and it should cause a change in the way that behavior is thought of. Like most people think of behavior, it changes the way society thinks about behavior. The next section at the end of this book is called The Future of Behaviorism. And Skinner believes that if we consider behaviorism, that it could solve many of the world's problems. So I have a question for you. There were 20 statements that were in the book about behaviorism that Skinner says are incorrect. And I went through those. So which statement do you either agree with and you agree that it is the correct characterization of behaviorism? Or which statement do you disagree with and think that the book, the statements at the beginning of the chapter, beginning of the book, wrongly characterize behaviorism. Thank you for listening, and these are my references.